For more than a decade, Sergio Ramos and Casemiro were two of the players Lionel Messi faced more than anyone else in El Clásico. Fierce tackles, red cards, and endless controversy turned them into symbols of one of football's most intense rivalries. Yet just a few years later, they found themselves wearing the same shirt. And that raises a question that still divides football fans today. Did they truly become teammates, or did they simply put the past aside in pursuit of victory? To understand how extraordinary this story really is, you first have to understand just how brutal El Clásico used to be. Today's rivalry is still fierce, but during the Guardiola and Mourinho era, it often felt like football on the edge of chaos. Every tackle carried emotion. Every decision sparked confrontation. Every mistake could change an entire season, and nobody embodied that intensity more than Sergio Ramos. For over 15 years, Ramos wasn't just Real Madrid's captain. He was the emotional heartbeat of the club. Aggressive, fearless, completely committed to winning. Against Barcelona, those qualities became even more extreme. There were sliding tackles that pushed the limits of the laws of the game. Heated confrontations, finger-pointing, verbal battles that lasted long after the final whistle. More than once, Messi walked away from an El Clásico with blood on his face after another collision with Ramos. To Barcelona supporters, Ramos became the villain. To Madrid fans, he was the warrior willing to sacrifice everything for the badge. Then there was Casemiro. Unlike Ramos, he rarely attracted headlines for dramatic confrontations. His job was different. He was Real Madrid's insurance policy. Whenever Messi escaped the first challenge, Casemiro was waiting. If Barcelona looked ready to launch one of those devastating counterattacks, Casemiro often made the tactical foul. Sometimes it earned him a booking, sometimes criticism, but almost always it stopped the danger. For years, football analysts described him as one of the few midfielders capable of disrupting Messi's rhythm. Not because he was faster, not because he was more talented, but because he understood something most players didn't. Against Messi, waiting was fatal. You had to act first. To many Barcelona fans, those tackles looked cynical. To Real Madrid supporters, they were intelligent, necessary, part of winning football matches. It became one of the defining images of an entire era. Messi weaving through defenders, Ramos charging across the pitch, Casemiro stepping in at exactly the right moment. Three extraordinary footballers, locked in the same battle season after season. If you had told supporters back then that one day Ramos would hug Messi like a brother, or that Casemiro would dream of sharing a dressing room with him, they probably would have laughed. Because rivalries this fierce weren't supposed to have happy endings. Then came the summer of 2021, a summer that changed football forever. After 21 years at Barcelona, Lionel Messi left the only club he had ever called home. Financial problems forced one of the most emotional departures in football history. Millions watched as Messi broke down in tears during his farewell press conference. For many supporters, seeing him wear another shirt already felt impossible. But what happened next felt even stranger. His destination was Paris Saint-Germain, and waiting for him there was Sergio Ramos, the same Sergio Ramos who had spent 16 years trying to stop him. The same defender who had become the face of Real Madrid during the fiercest El Clásicos in modern history. Suddenly, football's greatest rivalry had been replaced by something nobody expected: a shared dressing room. Of course, friendships don't appear overnight. 16 years of battles don't disappear because two players signed contracts with the same club. There was naturally a sense of distance at first, professional respect, careful conversations. A relationship built more on curiosity than familiarity. But football has a unique way of changing people. Once the club colors disappear, so do many of the reasons for conflict. At PSG, Ramos no longer needed to stop Messi. Messi no longer needed to beat Ramos. For the first time in their careers, they were chasing exactly the same objective: winning together, training together, sharing victories, sharing defeats. Slowly, the image that once defined football's greatest rivalry began to fade. Supporters started seeing something they never imagined: Messi and Ramos laughing during training, talking before matches, celebrating goals together, even spending time together away from the pitch. It was almost surreal. Two icons whose names had once represented conflict were now building genuine respect. But perhaps the biggest proof that everything had changed didn't happen at the training ground. It happened under the brightest lights in front of the entire football world. Some football moments are remembered because of goals, others because they remind us that football is ultimately about people. July 19, 2026, New Jersey, the FIFA World Cup final. At 39 years old, Lionel Messi had somehow produced another remarkable tournament: 8 goals, 4 assists, almost single-handedly carrying Argentina back to another World Cup final. It felt impossible. Another chance to finish one of football's greatest careers with one final masterpiece. But football rarely writes perfect endings. Spain controlled the match from the opening whistle. Possession, territory, chances, wave after wave of pressure. Argentina fought with everything they had, but this time it wasn't enough. After extra time, Ferran Torres scored the goal that ended the dream. Spain were world champions. Argentina's title defense was over. As Spanish players celebrated around the stadium, the television cameras searched for another story, and they found it. Lionel Messi, sitting on the pitch, head lowered, unable to hold back the tears. It was the image of a champion, realizing that his final World Cup journey had come to an end. Then, something completely unexpected happened. Instead of joining Spain's celebrations, Sergio Ramos walked in the opposite direction. A man who had spent 16 years trying to stop Messi. A man who had built his reputation on never showing weakness against Barcelona. He walked straight towards his old rival. No words, no cameras to impress, just an embrace. Long, quiet, genuine. For a few seconds, the fiercest rivalry of a generation disappeared. There was no Barcelona, no Real Madrid, no Spain, no Argentina. Just two football legends who understood exactly how much that moment hurt. Within minutes, the image spread across social media around the world. Many supporters described it as one of the defining photographs of the tournament, not because Spain had won, but because football had witnessed something even rarer than victory: respect. The kind of respect that can only exist between people who spent years pushing each other to their limits. And perhaps the most beautiful part of the story came only a few days later. Ramos posted a playful photo, recreating Messi's famous 2022 image of sleeping beside the World Cup trophy. Years earlier, that joke would have been impossible. Now, it felt like something only close friends could understand. The rivalry hadn't disappeared. It had simply evolved into something far greater. Exactly as described in your outline, this moment became the emotional peak of the story. The man who spent 16 years trying to stop Messi was the first to comfort him when his greatest dream slipped away. While Ramos and Messi had completed one extraordinary journey, another was only just beginning. This time, the central figure wasn't Sergio Ramos, it was Casemiro. For almost a decade, Casemiro had one mission whenever Real Madrid faced Barcelona: stop Lionel Messi. Not with spectacular tackles, not with reckless aggression, but through intelligence, timing, sacrifice. If taking a yellow card prevented Messi from launching a counterattack, Casemiro accepted it without hesitation. For years, he was one of the few midfielders trusted with football's most difficult assignment. And yet, the more he played against Messi, the greater his admiration became. By the summer of 2026, Casemiro's chapter at Manchester United had come to an end. Several opportunities remained open to him. He could stay in Europe, choose another competitive league, or begin a completely different adventure. His decision surprised many people. Inter Miami. At first glance, it looked like another superstar heading to Major League Soccer. But Casemiro explained there was a deeper reason behind the move. He wanted to play alongside Lionel Messi, not against him. Alongside him. During his unveiling, he didn't hide his feelings. He described Messi as the god of football. Coming from almost anyone else, those words might have sounded exaggerated. Coming from a player who had spent years trying to stop him, they carried a completely different weight, because admiration means more when it comes from someone who understands exactly how difficult the challenge really was. For Premier League supporters, the story felt especially powerful. This wasn't a teammate paying compliments. This was one of the toughest midfielders of his generation. A player renowned for his competitive spirit, publicly admitting that stopping Messi had often felt almost impossible. That level of humility is rare in elite football, and perhaps that's why the story resonates so deeply. Today, at Inter Miami, the player who once built his career around stopping Lionel Messi now shares the same dressing room, working toward one final objective: helping the greatest opponent he ever faced add a few more unforgettable chapters to an already legendary career. So, what can turn football's fiercest enemies into teammates? And eventually, friends, it's not that time erases the tackles, or the arguments, or the red cards. Those memories never disappear. What changes is perspective. The greatest competitors eventually realize that the man standing on the opposite side wasn't simply an opponent. He was the reason they became better. Casemiro spent years trying to stop Lionel Messi. Sergio Ramos spent 16 years proving he would never back down from him. But in the final chapters of their careers, both men chose to stand beside him instead. Because sometimes, the highest form of respect isn't defeating a legend. It's recognizing that you were fortunate enough to share an era with one. And perhaps that's the real legacy of Lionel Messi. Not just the goals, not just the trophies, but the respect he earned from the very players whose careers were built on trying to stop him. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which former Messi rival surprised you the most when they eventually became his teammate or his friend? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy football documentaries that explore the stories behind the rivalries, the respect, and the legends of the game, don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes, the greatest football stories begin after the final whistle.